Welcome to the 2014 Community Communication Meeting. To get started, I want to present a summary of how the county is doing so far in 2014, and then I'll go over the budget and tax rate that's been proposed for 2015, and then answer a few questions that were raised concerning our proposal. So far, as highlights go, the good news is 2014 is that costs are well under control. We're running about 10% under budget in the general fund, and ad valorem taxes are right at 100% collected so far this year. Unfortunately, sales tax are way behind the 2013 level, with other revenues kind of mixed. The really unexpected highlight for 2014 is that we received a $2.2 million grant, $2.5 million if you include our match, to improve county roads. But a not so good highlight is that our county tax base is down again for the third year in a row. So let's talk about each of these briefly. On the general fund at the end of July, we collected 99% of the $6.5 million in ad valorem taxes for the year and some $1.8 million in other revenue, which, if you project that out for 12 months, will give us a total revenue for 2014 of a little over $9.6 million, which, if that holds, will be the lowest we've had since 2011. We budgeted for $10.2 million. Well, the good news is our spending is well under control, and if we continue at the current level, we'll end the year at about $9.6 million in spending as well. So we'll break even for the year, and our current reserves of $848,000 will remain intact. In fact, if our revenues go up some in the second half, as I expect that they'll do, we should add a little to our reserves by the end of the year, and that'll be good. In fact, that's really good considering that we began the year budgeting to spend all of our reserves. Here's a look at our general fund revenues from other sources through July versus budget. Housing inmates from Coryell County has been a lifesaver for us, year to date having grossed $237,000, which is well ahead of budget. Fines and fees collected in my county court and in district court are running a little under budget to date, totaling about $200,000. Traffic fines collected year to date are at $200,000. That's well under budget, but that's due to the fact that we've been understaffed in the Sheriff's Department as well as in the Department of Public Safety, or DPS, and that's because they just are having trouble hiring people. The biggest disappointment this year has been sales tax revenue, which through July is at $623,000. Well, that's a lot of money, but it's well behind last year and it's well under budget. Well, this is the primary reason that we'll run some $400,000 or more under budget on general fund revenues this year. The four commissioners are also allocated ad valorem tax revenue for funding their operations. They each have separate accounts, and that's what we call our road and bridge accounts, and they're budgeted for some $881,000, which is 99% collected also through July. The other primary source of funds is the auto licensing fees, which you and I pay each year, and we've collected $143,600 rounded off, and that's times 4, which is $40,000 more than we budgeted, which is great. We've also received some $9,000 in each of these accounts in what's called lateral road fund, which comes from the state, and that was unbudgeted as well. So revenue-wise, we're well ahead of budget by almost $50,000 in each of these accounts this year. Spending-wise, precincts 1, 2, and 4 are over budget, which means that if they were to end the year that way, they would use some of their reserves. Well, precinct 1 has $1.2 million in reserves, and 2 and 4 each have about $500,000 in reserves. But what usually happens is that all three of these guys actually end the year right on budget, and so I expect that their reserves will remain intact. Now in Precinct 3, John Fisher is currently about $122,000 under budget so far this year, and he's likely to end the year more or less like that, because he's actually trying to build up his reserves, which had been depleted in years past. He's currently up to $241,000 in reserves and climbing, so he's making good progress. I think he's trying to get up to about $500,000 in reserves to be in good position for any kind of unexpected things that might happen. As I mentioned, one of the real positives this year was the confirmation that Milam County was receiving that $2.2 million in funds from the County Transportation Infrastructure Fund grant program. And we've got that done, and we're off and running on those projects. Now what you see here is the list of the 6 road projects that we're going to be doing over the next year and a half or so with these funds. And this map that you see next shows the location of these 6 projects. 2 of these are in Precinct 3, south of Gauss, County Road 353 and County Road 358. 2 of them are in Precinct 2 near Minerva. That's County Roads 232 and 235. One of them is in Precinct 4, County Road 429 or Shackleford Road. And the 6th one is in Precinct 1 out here near Yarrelton, County Road 353. Now this map that you see next shows the reinvestment zone that we will be required to create, or that we have created in conjunction with this grant, down in the southeast corner of the county, south of Highway 79. And any tax money that comes in on the increase in the property value in this zone over the next few years will be used for road projects in the county as well, which will also help us with road improvements. We'll be doing these 6 projects with our own county crews and with our own equipment. So what this will do will be to actually spread the impact of this money throughout the county, or throughout our county road system. Now, for the rest of the program, what I want to do is to discuss the 2015 budget and tax rate proposal. Overall, value-wise, the budget is essentially the same as this past year's. However, there are 3 features that need to be discussed. We're proposing a 2.75% pay increase for all the employees. The budget does include a 2.2 cent ad valorem tax increase over last year's rate to increase our rate to 65.2 cents per $100 valuation. And we are committing all $900,000 of reserves that will be built up by the end of this year to next year's budget. And I want to talk about all 3 of those. Now, the proposed budget is posted on the county website at www.milamcounty.net, and it looks like this. This is the first page of the budget, and it's on the website for you to look at. The increases are marked in red, and the decreases are marked in blue. The first 3 columns are the actual spending of 2011, 12, and 13. So you can compare what we're proposing for 2015 to the last 3 years of actual. The 4th column is the budget for 2014. And the red and the blue is the comparison of the 2015 budget, which is over on the right-hand side, versus the 2014 budget. And then the other column is where we are year to date. Column 5 is the actual year to date through June, which is half a year. So if you want to take June's and multiply by 2, that'll give you some idea of where we might be at the end of this year, 2014. But be careful, because some of the items a few of them we paid up all the way through the end of the year, but you'll be able to see that, I think, pretty easily. And the last column on the far right, as I said, is a proposed budget that we're proposing for 2015. So first, let me give you a kind of a general overview of the entire budget. Then I'll address these 3 major points: the raises, the rate increase, and the reserves specifically. at the end of the presentation here. All right, as I stated, overall, there's very little change from 2014 to 2015, as you can see here. The general fund budget overall is actually down a little bit. It dropped from 10.8 to 10.7 and change. And the overall budget dropped from 17.34 million to 17.32 million. This shows any of the significant changes made to line items in the general fund budget. At the top here are the revenue changes. These are the revenue sources other than the ad valorem tax that we've talked about, and we'll talk about some more. And just the other items, the significant changes. Overall in 2014, we budgeted for 3.7 billion from other sources, and I've dropped this to 3.3 million in 2015. The main reason that I've dropped it is because of this 400,000 is due to the loss of sales tax revenue, and the rest is due to primarily to the reduction. We've reduced traffic fines a little bit, and also the revenue from our fines and fees in the two courts, primarily county court and district court. Now, the bright spot continues to be housing of inmates. Now, the bottom part shows the expense side, and the pay increases that we're proposing, the 2.75% pay increase in the general fund, the total impact, both base pay and benefits, is $168,000. Danica figured that up, and the total impact of the pay increase is $168,000. 2015 is an off year for elections, so our election costs will be $30,000 less. Now, we're adding a part-time floodplain coordinator, which will cost us $7,500. We hadn't had one in the last year, so that's a plus back up there for that. And we're able to take off the $300,000 that we had in this year, 2014, because of the anticipated cost of the murder trial, so that comes out. In the courthouse and the buildings account, next item you see there, we're reducing one person who's retiring, our general maintenance and utility guy, and we're not going to replace him. We're going to use part-time contractor personnel as needed. And then the next item down is over in the sheriff's department where this guy did the cleaning. We're going to use a cleaning service there, and you see that add up there. And then we're going to give the sheriff a $7,500 travel allowance, and he's going to furnish his own vehicle in the future. We've had a few other increases there in the sheriff's department, feeding prisoners up $6,000, jail maintenance up $9,000, but medical costs are running a little less than we've been budgeting for, so we dropped that $5,000. Now, Milam County, along with Falls and Robertson County, are increasing their contributions to juvenile probation from $95,000 to $102,000, but we had gone down back 3 years ago from $111,000, so we're still not back up to where that budget had been. So it's still running low, although we have had to go up a little again. And finally, septic inspections. We're using a contractor now who charges $400 an inspection, and this is a good thing really, of new housing construction in the county is beginning to come back, but we've had to budget $40,000 for next year, which is an increase of $25,000. So that's an increase in our budget. But overall, the expense budget is down $77,000 from last year. That's only 1%, so that's why I say essentially the budget is the same as last year. But the revenue side is down 4%, even with that increasing our tax rate up to 65.2 cents. Our overall revenue budget is down, and if we hadn't increased it or proposed the increase in the tax rate, our revenue side would be down 9%. In the four road and bridge accounts, or precinct accounts, those budgets are all essentially the same also as last year. The revenue side is funded with $878,000 in each of the four accounts from ad valorem taxes, $175,000 each from auto license fees, and we're going to budget this next year from the lateral road fund $17,500 each. So that's where the revenue comes for each of the four road and bridge accounts. Now, these are all, also they all budget in their reserves in case something comes up during the year where they'll have to use their reserves for some, like a flood or something happens. Normally they do not use any of their reserve funds unless something comes up extra. They're each allocated 8 full-time employees, and they utilize part-time, contract type, or part-time employees as needed. Now, also you see on here a typical expense budget. They usually budget about $1.25 million each year. The 2.75% pay increase total, all four added together, will increase their budget spending by about $51,200. The third and final element of our overall budget is debt service. Now, back in 2013, we refinanced our $5.8 million in bonds. It was a little bit more back then because we retired some since then. Those bonds are for the law enforcement center. This reduced our annual bond payments from $671,000 back in 2012 to $613,000 this year. So you can see we saved a lot of money by refinancing our bonds at a lower interest rate. In 2015, our bond payments will be $618,000. We had some excess funds in the bond payment account at the bank, and we have used those funds these past this year, and we'll also use the rest of those excess funds next year. So in 2015, we still have $65,000 in reserves left, so we'll only have to budget for $553,000 for debt service on those bonds. So that's an overview of our budget. So finally, let me address those three issues that I mentioned: the tax rate increase, why we're giving employees an increase, and why commit all of our reserve. First, why do we need to increase the tax rate? This is the cover sheet for the budget proposal, and I'm showing this to point out that the proposed tax rate of 65.2 cents is the same as the effective rate that was calculated for this year, which is 0.652856. So we just took the 0.652. The effective rate calculation that we do each year is to show the public what the rate is that will generate the same dollar amount of ad valorem taxes as we collected the past year. Now, that effective rate is higher because the tax base went down. At the very top of this sheet here, you see that the statement says that the proposed budget will raise 86,000 and some cents more taxes than last year's budget, which is a little less than 1% more. So that's essentially the same amount as last year. I think the reason it is a little bit more is because Danica, our auditor, and I assumed that the tax base would actually be about 35 million more than what was reported by the appraisal district to us, since I was told that about 35,000 more was going to be added back into the tax base here shortly because of this issue over the Elm Creek watershed boundary that wasn't settled at the time that they had to report the tax roll to us. At any rate, that difference is negligible, but I did want to point that out. This sheet, this next one I'm showing you here, gives you a breakdown of the 2014 certified tax base versus the 2013 tax base, so you can see what's changed. Down on the far bottom right-hand corner, you can see that overall, the certified property values declined by $89.4 million, which means that if we had not raised the tax rate, the county would have lost, if you multiply that number by 63 cents, which was our existing tax rate, we would have lost $563,000 or thereabouts in ad valorem tax revenue in 2014 for use in budgeting for 2015 versus this budget year, the previous budget year. And that's a lot to overcome. So remember, we're also looking at a decline of about $400,000 in our other revenue, like sales tax, fines and fees, and like that. Now, looking at each category in this in our tax base, first of all, land. Home sites went up slightly, and market value of land, the market value of land went up a whole lot, about $100 million. But remember, we don't tax on market value, we tax land on ag value, which is what counts. And so ag value actually went down slightly, and so did non-ag land. So overall in the county, the taxable value of land went down $2.3 million. Improvements, which are all of your and my homes, both in town and out in the county, went down $11.2 million, and that includes non-ag property. Personal property, what they call personal property, actually is mostly industrial property, and that went down $175.5 million. And mineral property is the only thing that went up this year, and it only went up $8.1 million, and that's a far cry from what's happened in a lot of these counties around Texas where the minerals is going crazy. So if you add up all three of the categories, total appraised value in the county dropped $162.8 million. However, exemptions went down $75 million. So if you take that, that's actually to our advantage. Our properties only went down at $89.5 million. Now, this next chart shows you what happened to county and ad valorem taxes over the past 4 years that I've been in office, plus what we're proposing for next year's 2015. We held the tax rate steady for 3 years at 60 cents. Then they went to 63 cents this year, and we're of course proposing 65.2 cents for next year. And you can see the total taxes that have been collected, or that will be collected this year and next year, and what they are and how they're distributed to the three parts of our budget: the general fund, the 4 road and bridge accounts, and to the debt service. And you can see how tax collections have dropped each year due to the decline in the Milam County tax base, which is shown at the bottom, on the bottom line. Our tax base has dropped significantly every year. It's dropped over $300 million during this time period, and that's over 20%. Our tax base has dropped over 20%. This, folks, shows us what the closing of Alcoa has really caused. And it's been a delayed effect, but it's showing up more and more as we go along. And if Luminant were to close, then we would see what would have happened if it hadn't been for Unit 5 being built just about the time that Alcoa shut down. So we have got to really be concerned of the situation we're in and what could happen if the full impact is ever felt here. The tax rate, the decline in our tax base that we're seeing, and the increase that's beginning to happen to our tax rate is an omen of what can happen if we don't start getting some new industry into this county and don't start building our tax base. We can't wait until the aluminum power plants are history, because if that happens, we are going to see some dramatic impact in this county for sure. Enough said on that. Why the 2.75% pay increase is the next issue that I want to talk about. Of the 12 surrounding counties that we've surveyed, Milam County and Falls County were the only two counties that did not give pay increases this year. And I just talked with the county judge in Falls County, and they are planning on giving a pay increase this coming year. Now, they are going to give a flat rate increase. They're proposing a $100 across the board pay increase for all employees, which actually figures to be, if you figure it, is more than what our proposal is, I think. We haven't given a general increase here since I've been in office, and that's 4 years now. This chart that you see here shows the results of the 12 county survey that we did this year. You see the names of the counties kind of in the middle there, and I won't read these off. The left-hand column, and this is on the website, so you can look at it more closely if you'd like. The left-hand column shows the job titles. The top group shows the jobs where we are below the 12 county average. And the right-hand column shows you how much of the percent that we're behind the total compensation. The left-hand part shows base compensation. That's base pay and benefits. For most jobs, we are 9 to 11% behind the average, and some even more than that. The bottom group shows the few jobs that we are at or above the average, most notably the operators in the precincts, where we are right about on the average, which is where we should be, or we'd like to be on all jobs. The next survey shows jobs in the Sheriff's Department. Here, in addition to the 12 surrounding counties of similar size to Milam County, we also surveyed 5 larger counties. That's Bell, Brazos, McLennan, Travis, and Williamson counties. Because we compete for deputies with those larger counties as well. With the smaller counties of our size, we're fairly competitive, but with the larger counties, we aren't even close. And the next survey shows our jail department jobs, who are the folks that not only take care of our inmates, but also handle the Coryell County inmates that we house. In general, they are behind the small counties and not even close to the big counties. So it's no wonder that we're having trouble hiring and retaining people in the Sheriff's Department and in the jail. So as a result of these surveys and the fact that we are having problems filling openings in the Sheriff's Department and jail, we're making some adjustments in August of this year, that's now, to those jobs along with a few other county employees that were determined to need adjustments. These are in addition to the proposed 2015 2.75% general increase. These total $35,000 per year, but they're included, this amount is included in the $165,000 general fund salary budget increase that I mentioned earlier. The Commissioner's Court position is that we must maintain an acceptable pay program in order for the county to hire and retain employees. We have reduced the number of county employees as a result of our financial situation in an effort to help control costs. The budgeted number of county employees through 2012 and 2013 was 170, and then for 2014, we made the major reduction and we reduced the number to 163, and that number will be 162 in the 2015 budget. Now, actually, we run a few less than that budgeted number most of the time, since we typically have unfilled positions at any given point in time. Now, the final question is, why spend all our $900,000 in reserve, which is what I expect to have at the end of 2014? Why blow all of that, since we worked so hard to build that reserve up for our general fund? And the answer is because the budget, and I spent all this time talking to you about budget, but the budget isn't really what happens. We always spend less than what we budget. So we'll actually end up with money left over. And we've done that every year since I've been in office. These last 3 years prove the point that I'm trying to make here. In 2013, these numbers show what I'm talking about here. In 2013, we budgeted to spend $10.6 million. The reason it was higher is because of that anticipated murder trial. Actually, we spent $10 million. I'm rounding these numbers off. And we had total general fund revenue of $10.3 million. So we had $300,000 left over, or we had surplus. In 2012, the year before, we budgeted for $10.3 million. Tax revenue was a little lower, $9.9 million. We spent $9.7 million, so we had about $200,000 left over. Way back in 2011, we had a budget of $10 million. We took in more, $10.3 million, and we spent only $9.6 million. So we had $700,000 in surplus. So that's how we built up the general fund surplus that we currently have of $845,000 over these last few years. Because back in 2010, we were almost out of reserves. So look at 2014. We budgeted to spend all of our surplus this year, but I'm projecting that we'll actually have about $50,000 left over at the end of this year. And we won't spend any of our reserves like we budgeted to do, so we'll have about $900,000 in reserves to use for budgeting in 2015. We're not likely to build up any additional reserves in 2015, although I'd like to, because we need to build up our general fund reserves to about $2 million, which would be about right. But we should collect about $9.9 million this next year with a tax rate of 65.2 cents, and we'll spend about $9.9 million. I know we're budgeting for more than that, but we won't spend that much, folks. So budgets are just that. They're a plan. They're not what actually happens. So not to worry. We should, with what we're planning for 2015, we should end 2015 with our $900,000 or so pretty much all intact, unless some emergency comes along, and that's what it's there for anyway, is to, in case we have an emergency. So the experience factor is what comes into play here, and why I can tell you that we won't actually blow our reserves. So you just have to trust me on that one. Thank you very much.